What's up, guys? Welcome to another epic episode of J Philly Retro Toys, guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for clicking onto this video. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Guys, today's episode is going to be something a little bit different. Today, we're going to do a top 10 list. I'm going to give you my top 10 list for the top 10 wrestlers or wrestling tag teams that I wish they would have made into WWF LJN figures back in the 1980s. Let's go. So guys, you may or may not know this about me, but I would consider the WWF LJN figures from the 1980s at minimum one of, if not possibly, my favorite toy line of all time. Guys, when I was a kid, 8, 9, 10 years old, WWF LJN figures were almost the only thing I ever played with. I loved wrestling so much. I loved WWF so much back then. I was a huge, as I've said before in many videos, I was a huge Hulkamaniac back then. I had the Hulk Hogan workout set from LJN, which actually came with like a workout poster, a jump rope, a headband, a Hulk Hogan headband, some dumbbells. My mom and dad got me that for Christmas. Along with, I remember one Christmas I got probably dozens, I would say, at least 12 to 15 WWF LJN figures in one Christmas. And I don't remember what year it was, but it was awesome. I just remember opening figure after figure after figure, and that's all I wanted. And I was ecstatic. I was super happy to have all those in that year. So guys, I figured that today I would do something a little bit different for you guys, a little bit of a different video. As much as I love LJN figures, there are some figures that I wish they would have made that they didn't. Anybody that knows the history of the WWF LJN figure, you know that they ran from like late 84, early 1985 through early to mid 1989. In that last 1989 series was what they call the Black Card series. Another company had taken over LJN at the time and had produced one last round of figures, and then it just stopped, and we never got any more after that. Some series, like some tag teams, were broken up forever, which we may visit in my top 10 here pretty soon. Some tag teams were broken up forever. We never got, we got one half, but we never got the other half of the tag team. And so, there are figures and wrestlers during that time period that I would have loved to have played with as a kid. It wasn't like today where you have, 25 variations of the same figure, or, figures of every possible person on the roster coming out over and over and over again. Like, if you missed a figure, you missed it, and that was it. So, yeah, I mean, there are figures that I would have loved for them to make. We're going to go over them in just a second, but first, I'm going to give you guys a couple of honorable mentions that didn't quite make the top 10, but I still would have thought would have been cool. So, guys, my first honorable mention is a guy that I never really thought much of, but I did think this figure would be kind of cool after one particular incident that happened when I was a kid on WWF TV. If you remember this incident right here, you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about. At one point, Outlaw Ron Bass attacked Brutus the Barber Beefcake and split his head open with his spurs. He cut him in the forehead several times. And on WWF TV, they put this big, huge red X across the screen, and everybody wondered what the heck was going on. What was behind that X that you couldn't see? And that actually sparked a lot of interest. I would say that was probably the highlight of Outlaw Ron Bass's WWF career. So I would have loved to have seen at some point an Outlaw Ron Bass LJN figure. I can understand sort of why they didn't make it. There wasn't a whole lot of, interest in Outlaw Ron Bass. Plus, they had already made Terry Funk. They had already made Cowboy Bob Orton. So they already had a couple cowboy figures out. They probably figured they just didn't need another cowboy. And, who knows if Outlaw Ron Bass would have sold well. But as a kid, I would have loved to have seen Outlaw Ron Bass. A couple other figures I would have loved to have seen were Paul Roma and Jim Powers, who were known as the Young Stallions back in the mid to late 80s. They were kind of what you would consider a jobber team. I don't know if you guys don't know what that term is. It's one of the guys that lost every week on TV. These guys they're enhancement talent, basically, is what they call them now. The guys that are just there to make the bigger guys look good. So Jim Powers and Paul Roma were a tag team known as the Young Stallions. I always thought they were pretty good. They did a lot of high flying moves, a lot of like drop kicks and, flying through the air and stuff like that. I would have loved to have seen a Young Powers tag team. I don't know, maybe it's just me. I would have thought it would have been cool. And then finally, as far as the honorable mentions go, one guy that I think I couldn't stand as a kid, but I think he probably would have done well sales-wise, was a heel known as Dangerous Danny Davis, the evil referee. He used to be a WWF referee, and then he actually turned in the middle of a match into a heel when he cheated for the Hart Foundation and Jimmy Hart. I'm sure a lot of you 80s wrestling fans know exactly what I'm talking about, and caused the British Bulldogs to lose their titles to the Hart Foundation. I think Dangerous Danny Davis would have been an awesome WWF LJN figure. I would have loved to have owned him as well. Alright guys, so now we get into the actual top 10. These like number 10 through number 6 or so would have probably been released in like series 1 or 2 of the WWF LJN figures, because they're old school. They're probably 1984, 85, 86, somewhere around there. I'm going to say number 10 would probably be the US Express. Now, you guys may be familiar with them just because they were just inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame this last couple weeks ago at WrestleMania. But in 1984, 1985, the US Express were pretty friggin' awesome. Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham. They held the WWF Tag Team Championship a couple of times, I believe. Feuded with Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik. I don't know why they didn't make these guys. Around that time, they were making several different tag team sets as far as the LJN figures go. They had the Sheik and Volkov. They had Valentine and Beefcake. They had the British Bulldogs. They had the Killer Bees. They even had one of my LJN Grail sets, which would be the Hart Foundation tag team set. So, I mean, it would have easily fit in very well with those tag team sets. Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda. I would have loved to have seen a tag team set of them. I'm not sure why they didn't do that, but they would be my number 10 most wanted LJN figures. Guys, number 9 would have to be one of my, just a sentimental favorite. I never really thought he was a great wrestler. Never thought he was great on the microphone at all. Uncle Elmer was just cool. He was just a cool country dude. Big guy. He was Uncle Elmer. He was Hillbilly Jim's uncle, I think. There was a cousin at one point, too. Cousin Junior, I think. But the thing about Uncle Elmer that I remember was when Roddy Piper crashed his wedding on Saturday Night's Main Event. I don't know if you guys remember that. You know what I'm talking about. I just think it would have been cool, maybe even as a tag team with Hillbilly Jim. But to be, to go alongside with your Hillbilly Jim LJN figure, I think a big old Uncle Elmer would have been my number 9 choice. And guys, I'm probably going to talk about number 8 and number 7 simultaneously, because back in the mid-80s, women's wrestling was nowhere nearly as popular and as mainstream accepted as it is today. Back then, it was basically a special attraction to some, and to others, it was just a chance to go get some popcorn or go to the bathroom, nowhere near as, like I said, widely accepted or as mainstream as women wrestling is today. Which is sad because there were some really great women athletes that were in WWF at the time. Two of those would be number 8, I guess, probably the fabulous Moolah, who was well known as a female heel at the time. And then number 7 would be Wendy Richter. Fabulous Moolah and Wendy Richter feuded over the women's title back and forth for years. Wendy Richter especially was a huge part of the rock and wrestling sensation during WrestleMania 1 with Cyndi Lauper. I think both a Moolah and a Wendy Richter figure, LJN figure, would have done really, really well, especially with the little girls. I hate to say that because I hate to put boys and girls in boxes with the toys that they could play with. But we got to face facts. Most boys were playing with LJN figures. I think female wrestlers would have drawn in some other little girls. In my opinion, I think they would have been top 10 must-haves for the LJN figures. I would have liked to have seen them. I can't say when I was, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, I would have played with them that much. But as an adult, I think they would have been cool to have back then. So guys, the rest of the list is going to be a little bit later, like a little bit later series. I would say like the 88, 89, somewhere around there. And one of the guys that I think would have been cool to see an LJN figure of was Dino Bravo. The Canadian strongman, Dino Bravo. If you guys don't know who he was, he came into WWF around the time of WrestleMania 3. Stayed for several years. And he was just a cool guy. Personally, I obviously didn't know him, but as far as his character goes, I thought he was pretty cool. He teamed with Greg the Hammer Valentine after Brutus the Barber Beefcake became a babyface. And I think it would have been great. It would have been perfect to make him as an LJN figure. They already had Greg Valentine. They already had Luscious Johnny V, who was Johnny Valiant, the manager. He would have fit right in. I think Dino Bravo was a no-brainer. I'm not sure why they didn't make him, but I think I would have preferred to see him there. Coming in at number 5 for WWF wrestlers, I wish they would have made LJN figures for, is a guy that I think they had big hopes for and big plans for back in around 1987, 1988, and that would have been the Natural Butch Reed. Now, it's pretty well known that he was actually supposed to beat Ricky Steamboat for the Intercontinental title. That opportunity was then given to the Honky Tonk Man because Butch Reed no-showed at that TV taping. And Honky Tonk Man would have gone on to become the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time, at least one of. I guess it all worked out. Butch Reed, though, like I said, I think they had big plans for him. It just makes sense that they would have made a WWF LJN figure for him. I think if he would have been there to beat Ricky Steamboat, he definitely would have had a bigger WWF career. He would have had figures and all this other stuff. So I still would have liked to have seen, if that would have happened, I would have loved to have had the Natural Butch Reed LJN figure. So my number 5 is definitely going to be the Natural Butch Reed. Guys, number 4 on my list is another tag team. A couple of guys that I never really cared much about until they turned heel and had that freaking annoying Jimmy Hart as their manager. The Mouth of the South. I'm talking about Jacques and Raymond, the Rougeau brothers. These guys, again, didn't really think much of them when they first came into WWF. They were decent, a couple high flyer guys. But didn't really care much for them until they turned into annoying Canadian heels with their manager Jimmy Hart. That's, I think, when their career took off. Later on, you guys know the Mountie, Jacques Rougeau, would have gone on to singles career, Intercontinental Champion and all that stuff. But, yeah, I definitely would have liked to have seen the Rougeau brothers tag team as LJN figures. I would have loved to have played with them, feuded them with my British Bulldogs figures, my Killer Bees figures. I never did have those Heart Foundation figures, but Rougeau brothers would have been cool. Guys, number 3 on my list is probably a guy that would be on a lot of people's lists, honestly, as wish they would have made LJN figures of. And I'm talking about Bad News Brown. This guy was around late 87, 88, early 89. I can remember going to house shows in Columbus and seeing him against Randy Savage when the Macho Man was the WWF champion, like right after WrestleMania 4. I remember his feud with Roddy Piper, controversial feud with Roddy Piper for one reason, and that was that WrestleMania 5 Piper match. You guys know. If you know, you know, basically. If not, go read up about it or go watch WrestleMania 5. I don't know. They may have deleted that because it was so crazy off the Peacock and WWE Network or whatever. I've heard rumors of that. I've never checked it out myself. Anyway, Bad News Brown would have definitely been a figure that I would have loved to have had. Only problem is I'm not sure they would have sculpted him in a decent pose. He was never really a poser, you know. He didn't go into the ring and make any, you know, muscle poses or anything like that. So, you know, I kind of envision him maybe standing there like King Kong Bundy, just kind of like, ugh, you know, or something like that. Either way, as long as they would have made him playable, I would have loved to have had a Bad News Brown figure to fight Hulk Hogan, to fight, you know, the Macho Man, all those guys. I think it would have been really cool. All right, guys, so we're down to number 2 and number 1, and I'm going to talk about these guys simultaneously, just like I did a little while ago with the ladies, because they're very similar in situation. Guys, number 2 would be the Powers of Pain Barbarian, and number 1 would have been one of my favorite all-time WWF Tag Teams, Demolition, Smash from Demolition. Now, if you guys don't know why I'm putting these this high on the list, it's for the reason I talked about earlier. Back in 1989, they gave us half of the Powers of Pain. They put out the Warlord on black card. And then they also put out Demolition Axe on the black card. So we got Axe and we got the Warlord, but we didn't get their other halves of those tag teams. So the Warlord and Smash would definitely be my number 1 and 2 must-haves, must-wants WWF LJN figures. I would have loved to have completed both of those teams. 2 of my favorite teams, like I said, Demolition, one of my all-time favorite teams in WWF, but we will never have a Demolition Smash figure. Now, there are other toy companies these days who are kind of remaking or trying to remake the big, bulky, rubbery LJN style figures. In fact, I think they're called Big Rubber Figures or something like that. They're trying to give us some of the figures that we never got. But it's just not the same. You know, when you have Axe and you don't have Smash, it just feels wrong. It feels wrong. So, again, number 2 and number 1 would have been the Barbarian and Smash from Demolition on my list. I would have loved to have had both of those to complete both of those teams. And it's just, like I said, it just seems wrong. It's wrong. It's sad that we didn't get those 2 figures. So we got one half of the tag team. Anyway, so that's basically my top 10 want list of figures I wish they would have made in the LJN line. Now, you guys know, after 1989, early 1990, summer of 1990, I think, is when the first series of the WWF Hasbro figures came out. Those figures are incredible. Also, you see some of them right here. I had almost all of those as well. So I just went crazy with wrestling figures back then. I had to have those. So that's probably my second all-time favorite toy line is the WWF Hasbros. We got all kinds of figures, you know, after that 1989 LJN cutoff. We had like Mr. Perfect. We had the Rockers. We had all kinds of people coming in that we eventually got the Hasbro figures of, but you know, we're just a little late for the LJNs. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I really appreciate you guys watching, and again, not my normal videos, no thrifting or anything like that, but it was fun to do. So if you like this, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great week.